Hello, and welcome to Take Me to Eternity. My name is Leah Fiore Tracy. The world is just getting worse and worse these days. I mean, we're seeing laws being passed that are just despicable, and they are targeting our children, and they are targeting our rights as parents to be able to parent our children and protect them. People wonder why I say that persecution is coming. Or they say that I'm going too far talking about it. They tell me that no one will stand for the laws that are being pushed, and that as Americans, we have more freedom than that. But our freedom is only as good as those who stand up for it. And I see more and more people being swayed by the world's logic or lack thereof. Our freedom matters less and less these days, and more people are willing to take away that freedom. The freedom of speech, the freedom of religion, the freedom to be able to raise our children in a moral way that we want to, that we feel is acceptable and right and true. They're taking our rights away as parents, and they're diminishing the role that we have in our children's lives. Whether the reason is that people feel defeated and just don't bother fighting for our rights, or the fact that the system is broken, I can't say. But the world is agreeing on some radical issues. We're seeing them being pushed on our society and those of other countries, and everyone is caving. I mean, you can't watch Sesame Street or Muppets these days without seeing the agenda that's being pushed. It's in our schools, it's in churches. I'm not saying every church, but it is in churches, and in every church there will be someone who agrees with and promotes those agendas. Today I'm going to talk about a couple bills that have recently been passed or are in the works of being passed, and they're under the guise of something good and protecting our children, but in reality they are taking away our fundamental rights as parents, and they are handing over these rights to children who don't understand the repercussions of the actions that they can now take. So AB 957 and AB 665 are two of the laws that I'm going to be talking about, and I'm going to read from the laws. I won't read the whole thing, but I'm going to read parts of it because it's absolutely disturbing, and I don't think people are getting in and looking at what they're revising these laws to say, the things that they're adding in. I am seeing some people talk about it, but as parents, we need to be understanding that our children are getting more rights than they ought to have. And there are some things in the future that is going to change the way that parents can parent, and it's going to change the society that we live in. Conservatives are being called radical extremists these days. I don't know if you've noticed that, but more and more our higher officials are calling us radical extremists. Biblical truth is being called bigoted, racist, and hateful. We're the outcasts being plunged further into the outer circles, while sin and depravity is being glorified and proudly accepted. Now, I'm not saying that back in the day there was more Christians and that that we had more of a Christian society. I don't think that's true. We may have had more people professing to be Christian because that was what was socially acceptable. I think it's just more acceptable these days to be a Wiccan or a pagan or a Satanist or an atheist or whatever, and so we're seeing truth come out. But being a Christian, it's in itself, holding to biblical values, is now being called evil and wrong. And people are saying it needs to be gotten rid of. I watch as the narrative changes so quickly, words being used to weaponize the populations. One narrative being pushed, the propaganda coming out from school teachers, the president, and citizens alike. I mean, the world is uniting around a view and an agenda, and it's being pushed across the world. And if you don't accept it and you don't agree with it, then there's a problem with you, apparently, according to them. There's a new law that is just another push that makes it illegal to practice Christianity. It's another hit on our children. People, the government's coming after our kids, and they aren't being quiet about it anymore. They are telling us they're coming after our kids. When you see it at pride parades and such, them shouting and saying over and over again, we're coming after your kids. They've made songs, they have made melodies, all kinds of things that are chants that they're telling us they're coming after our kids, and so many people say no, they're not. AB 957. I'm going to read parts of it to you. Existing law authorizes a person to petition for a court order confirming the person's name to the person's gender identity. Existing law requires the court, upon the filing of a petition, commencing a proceeding for a change of name to conform the petitioner's name to the petitioner's gender identity, to make an order reciting the filing of the petition and directing all persons interested in the matter to make their objections known, as specified. Existing law requires the petition and order to be served on the parent who did not sign the petition, if a petition to change the name of a minor to conform to their gender identity does not include the signature of both living parents as specified. So what they're saying is, when a child decides that they want to change their gender identity and change their name, that it is in the court's best interest to conform with that change, and they need to inform both parents and get the signatures. And if they don't get the signatures, this is what happens. The bill would require the court to strongly consider that affirming the minor's gender identity is the best interest of the child. If a non-consenting parent objects to a name change to conform to the minor's gender identity. So the court is saying it's in the child's best interest to conform to the name change and the gender identity that they want to hold. They start talking about child custody and visitations and the nature of what the relationship is with both parents. It says, this bill would require a court, when determining the best interest of a child, to also consider a parent's affirmation of the child's gender identity. Their affirmation of it. This bill, for purposes of this provision, would include a parent's affirmation of the child's gender identity as part of the health, safety, and welfare of the child. So now they're putting this into the category of, if you don't affirm your child's gender identity, that is directly related to the health, safety, and welfare of that child. They're putting into writing that you must affirm your child's gender identity. You have to, because if you don't, then you are putting their health, their welfare, and their safety in jeopardy. If a non-consenting parent objects to a name change to conform to the minor's gender identity, the court shall strongly consider that affirming the minor's gender identity is the best interest of the child. In making a determination, this is 3011, this is what they were just talking about. In making a determination of the best interest of the child, the court shall, among any other factors it finds relevant and consistent with Section 3020, consider all of the following: the health, safety, and welfare of the child. As used in this paragraph, the health, safety, and welfare of the child includes a parent's affirmation of the child's gender identity. So they are saying that the health, safety, and welfare of the child has to do with the affirmation part. They're directly related, and it goes straight into, that was 1A. 2A is a history of abuse by one parent or another. So they're equating a non-affirmation of your child's gender identity with abuse, physical abuse. This is just atrocious. This bill is putting into writing some things that might seem small until you really unpack them. Each bill that's accepted with wording like this reinforces their position to be able to find out someone's a Christian and take their child away. They're establishing their law to have the right over our kids and legally be able to get away with it. I've been told that people won't stand for that, but it's already happening. I mean, it doesn't really matter what you think about it. This is what's happening. We're seeing across the world, in different places, people being taken away, or that people's kids being taken away from them, and even people being jailed for calling their child by the pronoun that they were, calling a girl, calling their child by the name, their legal name that they had when they were born. I mean, this is just atrocious. Doesn't matter if you're going to stand for it or not. I mean, at this point, our society and our government doesn't care what you think. This is happening in Canada and the UK. People are already being jailed for this. I've already talked about this before, and all you have to do is go start looking it up. Why would we think that it wasn't going to happen here? Like, why would we think that, the United States is just so much better and so much more moral? I mean, have you looked at the world around you? In the United States, there are places where children don't have to tell their parents that they want a sex change, and the government says that schools can help them with that health care, quote unquote. Just like abortions. I mean, they could do that with an abortion too. They don't have to have your permission for that. A child can go to school and get an abortion without their parents knowing anything about it. They can also go get, quote unquote, gender affirming care for free during school hours without their parents' knowledge. How many horrible things can happen in an abortion and the gender affirming care? I mean, that stuff is horrific. They're giving, they're chemically castrating children. They're mutilating. In societies, we have fought against genital mutilation in kids forever. And now we're fighting for kids to be able to be genitally mutilated. I mean, and we're teaching the kids, that society is teaching the kids that this is what they should be doing. It's going to make you happy. It's going to make you happy. This is what you need to do to feel good in your own skin. What person feels good in their own skin all the time? What person doesn't have some kind of problems with what they look like or feeling accepted in society? Who has ever gone through life and not had a period of time where they weren't comfortable with who they were? And now our kids are just being told, be somebody different. Do things that are going to change and alter your forever life on earth. They're going to sterilize you. They're going to mutilate you. But that's what you need to do. Go ahead and do it. You have every right at 12 years old to do that. If you can't tell, it makes me a bit mad. All that really needs to happen with this bill is for someone who hates Christians to say they aren't affirming their child's gender identity, and it's abuse. To have children ripped from their parents' home because they didn't affirm it. What generally happens in the cases of child abuse? The parents then have repercussions, correct, for abusing their children? Rightly so if it's actual abuse. I mean, if you are like beating your child or you are mentally, I mean, there is a lot of things that are absolutely horrific that should not be acceptable. But affirming something that is wrong and dangerous, even if you just tell your child, you should wait until you're older to decide. I mean, That's not affirming them. That's not telling them, good job, I love it, I'm so happy for you. In this case, the so-called abuse is simply a parent caring enough to speak truth and not affirm the choice of a child that's a lie, something that could be damaging to them. Not allowing them to get irreversible, body-damaging, so-called health care. That's abuse now. Affirmation is absolute approval and agreement with something, and never showing any kind of sense of not agreeing or approving of it. President Biden said, and I quote, "It's wrong that extreme officials are pushing hateful bills targeting transgender children, terrifying families, and criminalizing doctors. These are our kids." First, he is getting mad at conservatives, and some who are not conservatives. There are plenty of people out there who don't agree with what's going on, who aren't in the conservative Christian category. But these people are trying to put a halt on mastectomies and genital mutilation on children. Sterilization. This is the hateful bills targeting so-called transgender children. But did you catch that he said these are our kids? He said in another place, and I quote, "These are our kids. These are our neighbors, not somebody else's kids. They are all our kids, and our children are the kite strings that hold our national ambitions aloft. It matters a great deal how we treat everyone in this country, LGBTQ Americans, especially children. You are loved, you are heard, and this administration has your back." Hitler said, "He alone who owns the youth gains the future." You know, we're watching the socialist agenda being played out, and Biden is speaking the playbook. My children are not anyone else's children. They're my children. I'm responsible for them, their care, their well-being. I get to make the decisions for what's right for them. I get to raise them with the ideals that are good and right and true. They are trying to manipulate and pervert our children through all means possible, through music, television, movies, school curriculums. The indoctrination happening is everywhere. Many teachers are willfully indoctrinating our children, pushing their agenda and morality on the youth. And you know what? More parents, more Christians, more people need to stand up and say, this is not acceptable. It's not okay. We won't stand for this. You can't have my kids. Mark 9:24 says, "Whoever causes one of these little ones who believe to stumble, it would be better for him if, with a heavy millstone hung around his neck, he'd been cast into the sea." You know, I have watched as children that are from believing families, who profess to love the Lord, have been caught up in this agenda, and the depravity that happens is amazing. It's so horrifying and sad. These kids are so depressed and sad and hurting and wanting to be accepted, and this is what they're being told, that they need to change who they are in order to be accepted. You know, it's not right. That's not helpful. It's not loving. That is not caring about somebody else, to tell them, if you want to feel better about yourself, then you need to change who you are. At a fundamental level, too. Biden also said at a teacher's convention, I'm pretty sure, he said, "Rebecca put a teacher's creed into words when she said, 'There's no such thing as someone else's child. No such thing as someone else's child. Our nation's children are all our children.' As often we say, you teachers hold the kite strings to lift our national ambitions aloft. You really do. Imagine, just imagine, if we didn't have great teachers in this community, how difficult," mumble, it's Biden, "you are to determine our future." You know, He called our kids kites, and the teachers holding the kite strings. The schools are steering the children, and the children who are in public schools being taught by public school teachers, they are under attack right now like never before, and there is no escape in a public school right now. Not with a public teacher. The Nazi Teacher's Manual in 1938 said, "The school should always follow life. Never try to set the pace for life. Life precedes the school. If schools follow the dictates of the party, they will find their proper places." I mean, they're telling you right there, the Nazis were telling you how you steer the children. Children are a gift to their parents from God. He's putting them in our care, not the community, not the government. That our children aren't their children. They don't get to take our children away simply because they don't like the values that we hold. We see indoctrination in our schools across America. They've changed the textbooks and added their ideologies all over the place. It's no longer okay to say things like biological women without being reprimanded in schools. Kids are getting taken out of classrooms because they're saying, there's men and women and no other genders. Schools, a place where you're supposed to be able to find truth and seek truth and know truth, is now teaching lies. And they are teaching it in such a way you can't speak truth in them anymore. In some places, these kids are being kicked out for saying there are only two genders. You can't state that there are two genders or bring up any actual scientific view of man, woman, sex, and gender. You can't oppose the narrative, or you'll be silenced. These kids are being silenced. You'll be called extreme, you'll be called radical, some kind of phobic or racist or bigoted. And you know what? They absolutely hate Christians. They hate them. They hate God. They hate Christian values. If you are a so-called Christian who does not stand for biblical values, they will be so accepting of you. But as soon as you hold true to the Word of God and to what God says is good and right and true, that's not acceptable to them. That's extremist. You're a terrorist at that point. Christian morals and biblical truth is not just frowned upon, but not allowed in the town square anymore. People are being told to keep their ideas to themselves or in their homes. I've heard professors and high school teachers saying that very thing. Well, at this point, your home isn't even safe. You can't even hold those own values at your own house without it becoming a problem. It's treated like a virus, and we're told we don't have the right to believe them. It makes us homophobic, transphobic, bigots, and racist. We're oppressive and radicals. Biden's not the only one who's saying that our kids are also theirs. We have an interview with Melissa Harris Perry, a political commentator and professor. On MSNBC, she said, and I quote, "We have never invested as much in public education as we should have, because we've always had a kind of private notion of children. Your kid is yours and totally your responsibility. We haven't had a very collective notion of these are our children. So part of it is we have to break through our kind of private idea that kids belong to their families and recognize that kids belong to whole communities." How many people live in a community where they don't know their neighbors? Are my kids their kids? No, they absolutely are not. They don't own my kids. My kids aren't their kids. I can't say it enough times. My child is mine. Your child is yours. You are responsible for your child. You're not responsible for my child and their values. I am. There's another bill that just passed the Senate in California. Newsom has already sworn to sign it into law. It is AB 665. This is another bill that's being amended that looks like the government looking out for youth, but instead is linking together a thread to be able to take our parental rights away, to hand over rights to 12-year-old children, 12-year-old children. At 12, I was not capable of making decisions like these kids are going to have the ability to make for themselves. At 12, children already have the right to medical privacy. Did you know that? Did you know your kids have the right at 12 years old that they can go to school, they can say, I need an abortion, and the school legally has to bring them to get one without parental consent. You don't have to know about it. You don't have to know it was ever performed. They can tell their doctors, I don't want my parents to know what's going on medically, and legally have the right to block parents from knowing anything at all. I mean, if they're on birth control, puberty blockers, any of that, you don't get the right to know that after the age of 12. Think about all of the things that cause horrendous issues, death, horrible medical anomalies that you would not understand anything of what was going on if you didn't understand what was happening. You know, puberty blockers are known to cause cancer. There are so many things that can happen when you have these procedures done. You have these chemicals going through your body that are going to change you, and these kids aren't going to be able to say why their mental health declined so fast. You know, I myself and my child have had allergy medications. We have been given allergy medications that drastically changed the mental health of both of us. And watching it happen to my child was absolutely horrible. And it took somebody else showing me that this could be a possibility because of this medication, to even know that there was a way to help her, to help myself. And as soon as we stopped the medication, I'm talking about within days of stopping it, everything had changed. She was back to being happy again. Within days, everything was starting to look better. I found out things like the medication could cause epilepsy in children. Irreversible epilepsy. It could cause all kinds of things that if you don't know what is happening with your children, you can't help them. You can't be their advocate if you don't know what's happening. You can't help them understand what's going on or rightly address any kind of issues. You know, we have a problem with mental health being disregarded as it is. People are being over-medicated and they're being under-evaluated. So they're not being looked at properly and properly guided and finding therapy and just people who can help them. But more and more, our rights as parents are being taken from being able to help our kids when they need it. Think about all of the things that can cause these issues and unchangeable consequences, and 12-year-olds have the right to do them without their parents knowing. How many kids are not going to be helped because their parents can't help them because they don't know? We need to be close to our kids. We need to talk to them. We need to have an open line of communication. They need to know that we love them regardless of if we approve everything. I just don't know how people are going to be able to be more relevant to their kids than the people that they spend more time with than their parents. You spend more time in a public school than you do at home. You spend more time talking to the teachers and the friends than you do with your own parents half the time. That's why I am such a huge advocate for homeschooling if you can. We are our children's advocates. We're their guardians. They are entrusted to our care so that we can make decisions that will be the best for them. There is no way a 12-year-old can make informed and mature decisions about something that will affect them for the rest of their lives. There's a reason that at 12 you can't drive, you can't buy alcohol, you can't buy firearms, you can't join the army. There's a host of things that you can't do that are huge decisions that you need to fully understand the ramifications for. You can't even get a job at 12 without parental consent. But now, under AB 665, you tell somebody that your parents won't affirm you, and legally you can be taken out of their home. You can opt at 12 years old now. to be taken out of your parents' home without them having any say in the matter. So this bill is talking about kids having the right to seek their own mental health treatment and counseling services. And I think that's awesome that they can seek help, But there's a big but. They've changed the professional person. They've redefined who that professional person can be. And it means any of the following: a person designated as a mental health professional, a marriage and family therapist, a licensed educational psychologist, so a school counselor, a credentialed school psychologist, a clinical psychologist, the chief administrator of an agency, a person registered as an associate marriage and family therapist, a licensed professional clinical counselor, a person registered as an associate professional clinical counselor. They just widened it to, if a school counselor hears that you didn't affirm your child. A minor who is 12 years of age or older may consent to mental health treatment or counseling as an outpatient basis, or to residential shelter services, if the minor, in the opinion of the attending professional person, is mature enough to participate intelligently in the outpatient services or residential shelter services. So they're giving children 12 years old the right to say, I shouldn't be at home because abuse is happening, and that abuse that they're talking about is not fully affirming their sexual orientation, their gender identity, their new pronouns, their new name, any of that. In AB 957, we saw that the state has put it into law that not fully affirming your child is considered abuse, and it's to the same degree as a physical abuse charge. Affirmation is a very loose term that can mean anything from being happy about their preferred gender to accidentally calling them the name you gave them at birth, or saying the pronoun that they don't identify as any longer. Kamala Harris says, when you see our kids, and I truly believe that they are our children, they are the children of our country, of our communities. I mean, our future is really bright if we prioritize them, therefore prioritize the climate crisis. I know it's a bunch of jargon. Like, I get it's a word salad. She always does word salads. But it's just another person who is saying that they're our children. Is fighting for genital mutilation in children in their best interest? What kind of prioritizing them are we supposed to be doing? What do they deem acceptable and okay? Isaiah 5:20-21 says, woe to those who call evil good and good evil, who substitute darkness for light and light for darkness, who substitute bitter for sweet and sweet for bitter. Woe to those who are wise in their own eyes and clever in their own sight. That's just what's happening. Words are getting redefined. Good is now bad and godly is evil in the sight of our government and the people. Where being child-friendly now involves sexual exploitation, and tolerance is completely intolerant of any opinion that differs from yours. Hitler said, the state must declare the child to be the most precious treasure of the people. As long as the government is perceived as working for the benefit of the children, the people will happily endure almost any curtailment of liberty and almost any deprivation. Does this sound familiar? This is the Socialist Handbook being played out in front of us, yet no one wants to believe it's happening. People who speak out against it are also being silenced, and soon enough will be carted off to jail for such ideas. Threats of what are to come are being brushed off by Christians, and Christians are sitting back too scared to be called a name or lose their job. Do you serve man or do you serve God? That's a question that you're going to need to make a firm stance on in your own heart, because the day's coming when you'll need to stand for one or the other. You will be made to stand. There won't be any skirting around it. We have people that have come from communist countries telling us that what's happening is exactly how it played out in places like China. Yet we turn a deaf ear and we keep trusting the government, or act like it couldn't possibly happen to us. There's no way people could be that evil or the masses would fight back, right? Why do you think they are fighting so hard to take our rights to have guns away? They're fighting to take our parental rights away. They want to squash any right that we have. We need to go back to God and repent of our sins as a nation. The government is saying that our kids are theirs to do what they want with. There's somebody, most people probably know who it is, a lot probably don't. His name is Dylan Mulvaney, and he is a trans who has had his days, numbering how many days he's been trans. He was interviewed. The fact that he got an interview with Biden it just tells you everything. When he was interviewing Biden, he said, "Do you think states should have a right to ban gender-affirming care?" And Biden's answer was, "I don't think any state or anybody should have the right to do that, as a moral question and as a legal one. I think it's wrong." This is what the push is, legalizing whatever they deem health care and making it illegal to oppose it. It's already happening around the world. It's coming here now. They're doing it. Slowly but surely, laws are being put into place. We have the agenda of the LGBTQIA+ being shoved down our throat in kids' movies, TV shows, for all ages. I mean, shows for toddlers, shows for babies, as well as for older kids, and it's everywhere. You can't go anywhere without seeing it at this point. Every store I walk into has pride paraphernalia. If you boycott every place that raises a pride flag or stands for its agendas, you might as well get your own farm and live off the grid, because there's nowhere that hasn't bent the knee. There are so many different Christian quote-unquote places that have bent the knee. They have. They're duped, falling for it. We live in a world where prayer in your own head is being regulated, where being a follower of Christ means you have to negate everything he taught, where pedophilia is now a sexual orientation and permissible, being justified and promoted as acceptable. There's teachers who are teaching that it's not pedophilia. They're called MAPS. They're minor attracted persons, and they should be accepted too. They're teaching these in school. I've watched as children have fallen prey to this group. I've seen the evil that comes from people accepting and embracing what God says is an abomination. People need to fight harder to raise the truth and oppose the things that are coming against it. If you call yourself a Christian, I would make sure that I knew what the Bible says, what following God entails. It comes with a price. Choose this day whom you will serve, because there will be a day coming when it'll be tested. It'll be tested in a big way. We need to stand firm in truth, and to do that, we must know what truth is. Until next time, know truth, love truth, and share truth, because Jesus is the truth, and he's the only way. Be blessed.